card debt was one thing, but when you're speaking to the young demographic, based off of what you see in the older demographic, what are you telling them? What are the key things that you feel like you need to tell them?
So without alienating anybody over the age of 30 or
No,
35,
no,
because there's always time to, but start early, start young. I mean, it's such an unbelievable possibility when you want to save for retirement. We talk about compound interest. And I always give the example of the magical penny. And there's this, they come into a college classroom and the person at the front says, I'm going to give you have a choice. You can either have $10,000 or you can have a magical penny. And your magical penny doubles every day for 30 days. Or you can take the $10,000. And the example goes that most of the college students say, well, I would take the $10,000. Of course, this penny does not actually exist. But if it did, it actually would be worth millions of dollars at the end of the month. Because when something doubles and grows and grows and grows, the growth is also doubling and also growing. So somebody, for example, who starts saving for retirement at age 21 or 22 and puts away 100, sometimes it's matched by an employer, $200 a month, even if they do that for a short time, for a handful of years, they'll actually retire with millions of dollars in the bank. Whereas somebody who can put away for many more years, much more money, but doesn't start until later, they're always going to be playing catch up. So the advice is start early, start often, just to get into the game early, to be aware. Unfortunately, what happens is people who are not aware of those things, they start building a family very often. They're married, they have kids, and these are noble goals, and we never talk anybody out of those. But once you've started to pay for those different expenses, and there's a camp in the picture, and there's tuition in the picture, and you have a mortgage, all of a sudden there's no money left for things like saving for retirement. Another big thing that I love working with young people on is tzedakah, is taking out that 10%. It is very, very hard to sit down with a couple or a single who is in their 50s or in their 40s even, who already has a full roster of expenses and debts that they need to pay every month, and say, oh, and by the way, you've got to pull out 10% for charity. But when you have a young couple or a young individual who's just starting out and they haven't really decided where they need to fall out on that, that's definitely something that they can include, and that becomes a lifelong part of that equation. So that's.
So let's just use the charity example, taking 10% under charity, because that's like a hard number we can work with, as opposed to other spending where it's harder to know what percentage. But basically, how do you come to someone and tell them, with your budget right now you have to take out 10%? How does that conversation work?
So again, it works very differently for someone who's young and starting out than it does for somebody who's already established and who already has spending needs and habits that they've already committed to. As an example, I very often will sit down with a single, someone who's just started working, or via Zoom with the group in that age group. We had several successful seminars between, I would say, May and August, of young single women who were in their early 20s to mid 20s who had just started working, and they were taking notes furiously. They haven't started yet. They haven't committed to rent or to a mortgage, and they're just starting to work now. So when we talk about having an extra bank account and putting 10% of every check into it, even if they're not dispensing it at the exact moment it's coming in, but having it there and earmarked for Maser, for tzedakah, for that 10%, is something that's doable for them. And that becomes part of the habit and part of the